So, hi everyone. I'm Felicia from Affirmative Girls, and I'm here today with both girls from That's on Melanin podcast. And I'll pass it over to them to introduce themselves. Whoever wants to go first.
You can go
Amelia.
first. Okay, hi, I'm Amelia. I'm one of the That's on Melanin podcast co-hosts. I'm from the Bahamas, and yeah.
Hi, I'm Oyeshi. I'm from Bangladesh, but I moved to Toronto about 9 years ago. And yeah, that's it really. I'm a student. I'm one of the co I'm the other co-host of That's on Melanin podcast.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm gonna dive into some questions, get to know more about the podcast. What was the inspiration behind this specific type of podcast?
So I came up with the idea to do a podcast at the beginning, and it was because I saw, well, I love podcasts in general. I think in the last 2 years, I've gotten really into it.
Mhm.
And two of my favorites were the Say Bible podcast that unfortunately is no longer on air. But there were, and the other one is called the Skinny Confidential podcast. So between those two, I just felt like there was so much. And after what happened in June with the Black Lives Matter protests and
Mhm.
everything, um, the Skinny Confidential put out a very well meaning podcast episode where they talked about coming together and finding common ground. And the whole time, I just kept thinking, why am I expected to find common ground with somebody that like usually would not want me to have rights, would not want me to be here? So
Yeah.
why am I expected to do that? And I was mad at first, and then I realized that they they're a product of their environment. They're both white people running that podcast. And try as I might, I only found a few women of color podcasts.
Mhm.
And even then I felt like either the episodes were too serious or they were too light, and I just wanted a balance in between. And since I couldn't find that many, I just thought about creating my own. And obviously Amelia and I, we've been friends for I want to say like 8 years now, 7 8 years.
Oh wow.
And we
Yeah.
yeah, we went to boarding school together.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
yeah, and it was a predominantly white school. So more often than not at dinners, we would all sit together and we would talk about everything that went on during the day. So we would have these, and Amelia was the first person ever to tell me that when some a comment that my classmate made, I just thought it was a joke, so I was just saying it as a joke, and then Amelia was like, "Pause, that is really racist."
Well, I was gonna say, like, I feel like coming from an island where it's mostly black people, so I grew up in a space where it wasn't, where white people weren't the dominant.
Yeah.
I had a different understanding of race and like racial interactions. And so going to a school where it was like I went to an international school in the Bahamas, so I was around like white people, like it wasn't a big deal. But like going to a school where it's predominantly white and like hearing the interactions, like where most girls, because they grew up in that environment, they just kind of ignored it. I
Yeah.
think I saw it very differently. And so that kind of pushed me to like like with Oyeshi, how she just said, like kind of just have her like pause and like really think about what was being said to her.
It was just very natural, and over the years I would always send Amelia texts, and um, everything, if something happened, she was one of the people I would text. And I feel like Amelia has such great taste, obviously, since she's friends with me. um, so yeah, and I thought who better to have that podcast with than Amelia.
That's great. I feel like it's important to have, someone who might not even be from your specific ethnic background, but who has their experiences. Because I also like I don't not necessarily have the same experience as you, but I grew up in a very small white town, and it wasn't until I moved up to Toronto where I realized some of the things that were being said were definitely problematic. Because I was like,
Yeah,
I had no way of knowing that. So
exactly.
I think
And Toronto's super covert with their racism. Like you
I
have
know,
to pause and think about it.
I
Yeah,
Then
know.
it's
that's the
like,
next
oh wow.
thing. Because Canadians are like nice with it.
Yeah,
So
I feel like it's the micro. They're big
yeah,
on the micro racial aggressions.
yeah,
Yeah. Now I'm just like, no, I call you out on anything, but back in the
exactly.
day, I'd be like, oh, it's funny. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
um, so to jump on that and the fact that you have been friends for so long, I enjoy like when I'm listening to your podcast that it sounds like you guys are having a really fun time. And it's just like conversation between friends. And I'm just wondering, because of the way the podcast flows for me, do you decide on topics beforehand, or do they just kind of come about, sporadically or whatnot?
Well, we have like a shared notes document like on our phones, and we just kind of like when we get an idea, we write it down. So we have like a really long list of like potential ideas. Like
Okay.
anytime that something happens or we see something on social media, we'll write it
Yeah.
down, and I'll like text her and be like, "Oh my god, we have to talk about this." And so we kind of like try to merge the different ideas together. Um, but like usually we text each other beforehand to kind of think of what do we want to talk about this episode. Like with
Mhm.
the Olivia Jade episode we had, like we originally were going to talk about something else, and then that interview came out and we were like, nah, like we
Yeah.
got to talk about this, you know?
Yeah, and I think for us as well, we want to keep it a little bit more light, as well as talking about the heavy topics, because
Hmm.
at like obviously we can go on about financial privilege and affirmative action and everything in between, but I think it's also important to have that break in between, because most of the people that listen to our podcast, I feel, are women of color. So most of them already know like what comes with affirmative action, what comes with financial privilege. So we also want to make it a little bit lighter so that they're like, okay, yes, and then they can find some pop culture topics, and we love to merge the two together.
So from listening to your the past few episodes, something I've noticed that's come up a few times is you've discussed like past relationships with white friends who have said or done problematic things, and we've talked about this. But how do you personally deal with those situations?
For me, I think that interracial friendships are so nuanced, and the people that I talk about on those episodes, A, don't know that I'm talking about them, and B, I've known them for, again, like 7 8 years. So
Mhm.
it's really hard to talk about things that have come up in the past that I just didn't address because I was too scared about it, and I was so scared of losing that friendship and stuff.
Yeah.
So I am not the best at speaking up, if I'm being real. And most of the time, if I like, again, Amelia is somebody that will encourage me to talk about it, because I'm a bottler, so I'll keep everything inside until it erupts. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, even though I'm probably the person that talks about it the most.
I feel like Oyeshi's examples are interesting because, like, I think there's also some, not that Oyeshi is, but what I'm trying to say is her white friends sometimes tend to be delusional. Like how she said, like, sometimes they don't know that that she's talking about them. Like, the the ability for them to like remove themselves from the situation and not even know that that's who she's referring to, like, it's just wild to me because she's holding on to that for so long, and like she has like these specific instances where she like can recall these and they literally will never know it's about them.
Mm.
And yeah, so for me, I'm like, you gotta tell them, like, if it's like repeated behavior, like there's a pattern, at some point you have to like cut the
Mhm.
cord, like say something, because it's only you who's being affected, like they're not being affected.
Yeah. No, I feel that. It's rough being on both ends of that because I
Yeah.
get, not wanting to lose friendships, but then, sometimes it's like this person's stressing me out.
Also,
I'm
to
afraid
add
of
a
what's gonna happen, what they say.
yeah,
So
and
it's
to add, I just want to add a little bit more context to the story. It's that I live in Canada by myself. My parents
mm,
don't live here. So I am constant, like, so whatever friends I have here are the people that I spend most of my time with.
Yeah.
So again, it's really hard to say something and then lose that friendship and be alone.
No, yeah. I get that. And it sucks
Yeah,
because it's putting it on you, right? Instead of them doing the work to, you know,
exactly.
make sure that you're comfortable. Because it's like they're comfortable clearly, so why is it not a two-way thing, right?
Yeah, and that's my thing. Like my whole thing is if you're in a friendship where it's constantly you uncomfortable and it's constantly you having to bite your tongue, it's kind of you're putting so much energy into that and like it's just it's not worth it sometimes. Like I hear what you're saying, like where you're coming from Oyeshi and everything. Like I've had to go through it as well. But like honestly,
Hmm.
you can make new friends. Like who are better for you. Like that doesn't mean that they're not white. Like there are white people who are woke
Hmm.
who can like not say
Yeah.
disturbing, problematic things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate both of those answers because it's like I definitely get where both of you are coming from and have been in both spots in my life
Yeah.
also. So thank you for that. Um, Speaking on that, it's very clear that you're both well informed and well spoken on topics about race. And I feel like it's important for people, specifically white people, to educate and self-educate and not rely on, their POC counterparts to do that work for them. So if even at the top of your head, do you have any maybe book or even podcast recommendations for people who want to learn more about race relations and whatnot?
I recently just started a new book actually. It's called White Tears, Brown Scars.
Mm,
I think it's how white feminism betrays women of color. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, it's so good so far. Like when I tell you, like everyone should pick up this book. Like
I've been wanting to read that.
it is so good. Like I just started like 2 days ago, and I'm like halfway in. Um, it like just speaks to everything you've ever experienced as a woman of color, and like
Yeah,
also pointing out. I think you had mentioned earlier, like how when you moved to Toronto, like you understood like the different experiences of like different people of color. Like it's amazing to see how we're also like connected in our experience. Like
yeah,
because this author, she's I think she's brown. Um, I can't. She's not. I don't think she's black. But like, and when she's talking and discussing the issues, like she refers to like how different women of color have like went through these things and like how like we all have experienced the exact same like experiences when it comes to like white feminism, when it comes to
mhm,
like how we as women of color, like one, you have the racism, and then two, you have like the
Colorism.
patriarchy, not well colorism as well, yeah, but like just the added like gender plus race relations. So check that out.
yeah. That's good. I've been wanting to pick that one up. It's been on my list. So
Yeah,
that's good.
definitely
One of
recommend.
one of my favorite books that I read was Hood Feminism, and it's by Mickey Kendall. And reading that book just blew my mind because I was like, oh my God, I thought I knew, like, I didn't think I knew everything, but I thought I knew a lot. But
Yeah,
reading that, I realized, like, oh my God, I know absolutely nothing. And that's a great book that I recommend to everybody, really. And another book that I'm reading right now, it's called Words of Fire, and it's basically a collection of essays with Black women who talk about feminism throughout the decades since the 70s, I think. Also, I kind of want to say, like, with books, you don't have to just buy um, the books that are about these issues. You can also buy books that are by Black authors, and it can be in a fiction genre as well. I recently read this other book called Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis Benn, and reading that book was, I can't ruin it at all, but oh my God, after reading that, I had to run a bath, sit in it, and think about the ending for at least an hour. It was absolutely insane. So I'd recommend supporting Black authors that don't write about race relations all the time as well.
very much agree with that. I feel like again, well, the reason why I like your podcast is like yes, we're talking about things, but it's also nice to just hear people talk about their experiences and not everything has to be negative. So it's nice to just read, about Black and brown people just living their lives. So I
Yeah.
definitely, my goal for next year is just to read books by, you know, specifically for me, Black women, and, especially fiction, because I feel like it's important to support and then just read about those stories. So, how do you feel about the way social media has shifted a lot in the past year, specifically 2020, in terms of people wanting to be more performative about their allyship? And I guess I'm really talking about like in terms of if you remember the Black Square Day on Instagram and stuff like that. So how do you feel about how that this year has shifted in that way?
I feel like you want to be involved in these issues and you don't want to come across as like racist or like that you don't care. And so I think that's the first thought in people's minds when they like jump on like these trends, like the whole black square. Like I know I fell trapped to it. Not gonna lie, I posted, but like I actually understood like the backhand story of like why they were doing it, right? But then it became this thing of like the most random people like
Yeah.
posting it, and I was like, why are you even posting it? Like it was just so random, like the people I saw it, and like there was nothing. I'd never seen them post anything about like race, anything like any social issues, and so it was very confusing to me. So like to see that level of performance, and then most of them deleting
Hmm.
their black squares like because it's not matching their aesthetic
Yeah.
on their Instagram. Like that was just wild.
Yeah.
And not, not only that, some blatantly racist people were that I knew in real life were posting the black square, and it just felt so performative to me that I actually archived my black square because as much as I want to be an ally to the black community, I never want my support to feel performative.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. Also, I do run a beauty page, and one trend that I did notice was during that week in June in particular, a lot of Black creatives on Instagram got a lot of followers and they got a lot of interaction. So as soon as that month was over, none of them got that steady amount of interaction ever again.
Hmm.
So people were really focused on them for that month and then they just forgot about it. So all in all, it just felt very performative. It felt people thought that just because we talked about it for a week or maybe 2 weeks, that racism has been solved,
Yeah.
that we're going
Literally.
to make great progress.
Yeah.
Like, and also with the election of Kamala Harris, it's like, okay, then why are you complaining about it? One of your own is in such a powerful position.
They
So
like say that.
it was a lot of back and forth like that.
I guess jumping on that, I mean, those were very good goals. But do you have any advice for other Black and brown girls who want to make a podcast?
I'd say for sure make sure you have time to devote to it because it does take a lot of your time away.
Hmm.
Um, and we're both students, so it can be stressful at sometimes. But like another thing is make sure you have like a co-host that you enjoy spending time with,
Yeah.
like you enjoy interacting with, because we really lean on each other to make sure like things get done, and like it's good that we have like that friendship and that level of respect for each other where like it works out well.
And I think one other thing that I would say as well is that you have to provide value to whoever's listening, because I think with us we will always recommend a resource or a book or something of that sort to help you further with whatever we're talking about. And another thing is that it's really important to know what your podcast is about as well. It can be
Yeah.
about anything really, but you have to figure out what the niche topics are that you want to talk about. So if it's social justice, it's social justice. If it's beauty, then make it beauty, or it can be anything really, but just make sure you're providing value to your listeners because that's something that will ensure them coming back.
And like also like just don't be afraid to do it. Just do it. Like
Mhm.
I think people get scared that like, oh, maybe no one's gonna listen. Oh, there's already like a black podcast, and it's like there's so much room for all of us. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many podcasts about random stuff. Like, girl, guy, whoever. Like, you can go start your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we like have the confidence of a mediocre white guy who thinks like you can talk about shit and it will be interesting. Just have that confidence and it will work out.
Right? That's like my motto for them. It's just like if they can do it, then anyone can, right?
Mhm.
Literally.
Joe Rogan.
Well, thank you so much. This is a really great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I will be linking, obviously, in the post to the page and the podcast. And I listen to it on Spotify, but I know that if people listen to it on Apple, they can leave a little review. So they should do that and get it spreading around. And yeah, um, whenever I'll be reposting on Instagram when you have new episodes out. And yeah, thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
No, thank
Thank you
you.
so much for
We
having us.
appreciate the support, like this little like
Yeah,
community you're making.
honestly.
No, this is great. I mean, this is the point of why I'm doing all this. So I'm very, very glad.